Hello, everyone. I am Pamela Erika from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Anna Brown and Erika Ellis. Hello.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about building community, and I am very excited to chat about it because at first, it seems like a pretty simple idea, right? Find and connect with other people. But really, it's so much more nuanced than that. So I'm excited to dive into that. But before we get started, we just wanted to remind you about our shop. There you can find my unschooling books, book coaching calls, or buy one of our courses. And our newest course is Validation, which is a transformational relationship tool for building understanding and connection in our most important relationships, like the ones with our kids and our partner. All our course content is available in both text and audio formats, whichever style works better for you. So maybe you want to listen on some days and you have a moment to read on other days. They can fit into the flow of your days, whatever they look like. You'll find it in our store at livingjoyfullyshop.com or just follow the link in the show notes. So, building community. Anna, would you like to get us started?
I would. So I'm pretty excited about this because I don't know, I have so many ideas bubbling around. So we'll see where it all goes. But I think where I want to start, because this is a question that comes up a lot on the network. It comes up, just over the years, you hear a lot of, friends for my kids, or what do we do about finding community? Or there's not a lot of unschoolers around me, or all these different pieces. And so I think the first kind of grounding place to be is we're just going to slow it down and take a deep breath and just say, okay, where are the messages coming from? Like when I look at my kids, are they happy? Are they asking for more? Are they okay with the relationships that they have? Do I see that they're wanting a little bit more? Is it me? Is it that I'm wanting more? Is it that I'm not wanting more? And then I want us to talk about people are different in that way so that we can recognize that this is going to look unique to each family. It's going to look unique to each child. And so just really recognizing that there are some cultural messages of, kids need to be with kids their own age. And it's like, hey, let's just pick that apart a little bit and see where it comes from. So I want to throw that to you all first, but wanted to start there.
Yeah, I totally have heard that and felt that and right, all of those things. And right. So if we're looking at like our experience, if we did go to school as kids, like life as a kid looked absolutely packed full of time with other children. So it makes sense, like if our children's lives are looking quite different from that, that maybe that could be a little jarring or like, is this okay? And kind of those questions can come up. But right, if we actually look at the personalities in our families, what our kids are asking us, how we're feeling, how they're feeling, and it's okay if I'm the one who is wanting more connection. And it's okay if my kids are asking for more connection. But right, just tuning into, is it just that everyone else is in school and in all these activities and it's feeling like maybe we need to be doing that too? Or is it really tuning into who are we? Are we happy with our lives right now?
Yeah, a little bit.
I do think it's so valuable to take that moment and just really consider how much of it is stories and messages that we've absorbed, growing up and over the years. Because, I found myself jumping to community as kind of like the first answer, as in, oh, you're interested in this? Let's join the sports team, let's go take a rec class. Like that community and that type of more conventional learning is the first answer that comes to mind, right? And so just really pulling apart that, like, oh, okay, that doesn't always have to be the answer. What actually is happening here? Is this something that I'm just pulling out? Right. And then even for our kids too, I think another thing that was always so helpful for me, even when my kids were looking for community maybe or looking for friends, was to realize this really wasn't about the unschooling.
Right.
at all, right? It's really helpful to help them dig into it too. Like, what is their need that they're actually looking to fulfill? Because often we can jump to, and our kids can too, jump to like friends, other people, groups. Like those are the answers. But to take that time to just really dig, well, what am I really trying to accomplish? What do I really want to do? And just open things up again can be so helpful, I think.
Yeah. And I think maybe not to romanticize, the past, because, I think we can all, and I did live in a neighborhood where we were out and we were playing and there were kids around, but it had its challenges. I'm an introvert. There were challenges to it, and thinking of school, kind of segregating us by geography and age, into a box of a room. It didn't always work. Like those weren't always the people that I connect with. And I think of my life now where I have friends, 15 years younger and 15 years older. And so I think really we're so lucky in our life that we can, really lean into what works for our children and for ourselves in terms of connection and relationship and learning. Because like you said, Pam, if we go to, well, we need to do a kids class on science, that's its own thing versus maybe it's being mentored by somebody that's really interested in the field that you're interested in and they're an adult and it's more of a one-on-one. So yeah, I love that idea of just like kind of unpacking all of those pieces.
Right. And right, like that there's not one right way for community. So I mean, just like everything else we talk about, like there's not just one right path for I'm interested in dance. Okay, it has to be this group class. That's not necessarily the thing. And I love that idea of like in many cases, socializing with an adult who's super interested in the things that they're interested in, that might feel like a way more, kind of suitable community in certain moments. So I really love that. And I was thinking about some of our experiences with kind of in-person community for my kids. And so a couple of things that we tried just based on, what I was looking for, what the kids were looking for. And again, just playing with all the possibilities. We really liked hosting park days because I found just kind of going to that same location at the same time each week was a way to kind of, I don't know, have time for those kind of connections to develop, because I have found that if we do these kind of one-off, like a class or a one-off, let's all go to the museum, there's not enough kind of free time for the kids to really have a chance to interact. And so since my kids are very introverted, slow to warm, we laugh about it with our friends that are now kind of our best, his best friend, that it took just months and months of this child following Oliver around and trying to talk to him before they finally really had a strong connection. It just took all that time to warm up and make that connection. And so having that regular park day was something that helped us develop friendships. And while most other groups that we saw were doing things like a planned adult-led activity at the park, I was careful to make mine more just open playtime so that the kids could kind of find their buddies and, make connections that way. And that was just, I advertised it in early days as just a parenting group. And then as the kids got older, we turned it into a homeschooling group because then that way we were finding the kids who were available during school hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely our experience too. So we were at the time in a fairly large city on the East Coast. And so there were a lot of homeschoolers in the area, but we found that consistency of the park day was exactly that. Like it was just like this known, it felt good. We could do different things. And the only thing I kind of wanted to add to that is we really like thinking about the different ages. I always found this kind of fascinating because with the younger kids, it's a lot more physical in nature. They like to have physical things, the playground equipment, the whatever. And then you get to this teen age where they want to sit. They want to sit and they're kind of chatting, or sometimes they need like a side-by-side kind of thing. None of the people that came to this were particularly sporty, but we would play kickball. And it's not super sporty, pretty much anybody can play, but it did allow for a little bit of kind of parallel time for the teens and for those kind of preteens to have something that you're focusing on that's outside yourself, but also it's not super involved or competitive. It's just kind of fun. So that was something that worked well for us. But yeah, having that open park day where people could hang out in a place that had different, places to sit, places to climb, places to do, really worked well. I think another piece that was important for kind of our in-person thing is I did a lot of driving. Our city was large, and I just was okay with driving to connect with other people and to do, so it wasn't the neighborhood kids. It was driving to find people that were available during the day and that we do. So kind of letting go of some of those tapes of like, oh, you should just be able to swing open the door and there's a pack of kids, Thankfully, we didn't have that actually. I didn't want that. We didn't have it. I was glad. But it did, for some people, that's a stumbling block to realize like, okay, there's going to be a little bit more facilitation. But I think this may lead into kind of your experience too, Pam, is this, the interest driven pieces, as opposed to like, we did do the pieces of like homeschool groups and homeschool things, but we found a lot of connections were made via interests. And I think that was kind of your experience. Right,
Yeah,
Pam, with
because we did not have park days yet, however, 20 odd years ago here in Canada, there were just less numbers of homeschoolers, right? So there really wasn't that kind of activity to participate in yet. Like you said, we really went through interests, right? So the nice thing about connecting with people through an interest is you've already got that point of connection, right? You don't kind of have to find something to come up in conversation with. So the other fascinating piece too that ties in with what you were saying with the driving piece is like, okay, you've got an interest and you've decided that actually participating in that interest around other people and with other people is something that they want to try out or you want to try out. And then it was about finding a place that connected for them. So it wasn't, oh, you want to take dance class? Here's the closest dance studio. We've signed you up. Here we go, right? No, there were times when I was driving an hour and a half, but to a place that really spoke to them and that really helped them get that experience that they were looking for, right? So that was a very helpful thing to kind of unpack for myself that, oh no, why would I go and drive, a distance when I've got one around the corner? But when you go back to what the desire is, when you go back to this child or myself, like we're a unique person and we're looking for a specific thing, when you can find that and find the environment where that can thrive, that it just makes a whole world of difference. And then from there, what we would find, and even if it wasn't something unique, I remember Lissy and Girl Guides for a number of years. It was because she was looking for some more connection and activities, but not a particular one, right? She was looking more for that engagement. So that served for her for many years. And then when we wanted that space that you were talking about, Erika, because that space to just hang out and see how things unfold and to just let conversations and activities grow. When they found someone that they would like to connect more deeply with at the activity, then, I would talk to the parents and invite them back to our house. And that was the thing too, is being open to being the place where people would hang out. Maybe I needed to drive and pick up the child and bring them to our house, for that to happen because the parents were maybe busy with a sibling or something else. They didn't have time. And for them, it wasn't a huge priority to like drive their kid to some other kid because their kid's in a class with 30 other kids. Like they see other kids all the time. They weren't prioritizing that. But if the other child wanted to come for a visit, I would happily put out, I'll go pick them up and bring them over and take them home whenever you need. And yes, they can stay over or they can stay for a meal, blah, blah, blah. But me being, open to doing that extra little bit because it was accomplishing what we were wanting to do. It was meeting a desire. It was something to try out. And so far, some lifelong friendships have grown out of that. And it's just so fascinating to see it in action and to realize that, we don't need to know when we talk about building community, we don't need to know like, yes, there is a community at the end of this path. And I just
Right.
have to quickly walk it as fast as possible. But when I'm open and curious and I see possibilities, and we really, again, just what feels good in this moment, what feels like it might help us walk towards this pull that we're feeling, and then seeing how it unfolds is just so much more serendipitous things happen, I think, when we're open to that versus like, we must build community right now. Here we go.
Right. I feel like that's something we talked about in the network a bit, this kind of playing around with, setting up activities for a group and kind of seeing what could come from it. And that was something that I had to, as kind of someone who was organizing events for a number of years, I had to really come to terms with being okay with people not showing up or being okay with things kind of, not going according to plan and just trying again. And so, one thing that I learned was just to choose activities that I would be happy and our family would be happy to just do, even if no one was there. And so if you are a family, with some extroverts or with some people who do like doing activities in groups, it does make a big difference if you're the one willing to plan things, because people are always, looking for things to do. And then just, my advice about that would be to just choose things that you'd be happy to do, even if no one shows up, because then there's really no disappointment. You get to do something fun. And if other people come, maybe, you've chosen an activity and then met, someone who enjoys the same thing you do.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was going to say, because that was, we got to a place where we had a pretty good sized group, but there were certainly fits and starts. And that was the key. Like talking to my kids, okay, is this something you want to do? I'll put something together, because you're so right in that. That's the part people don't want to do. And partly it's time and extra kids and all the things. And it's something that I don't mind doing. And so, when I would kind of build it, they really would come because they were so grateful, and again, we lived in a city with a lot of homeschoolers, so we could get homeschool deals. I could make that call and get, super cheap at the trampoline place or at those things. And people were so happy to participate in that. And it did give us, just people to share things with. But one of the other things I want to talk about too, in relation to this in-person piece, is our own needs as adults and as parents, because, I think we're all introverts here, but we have varying needs of like, wanting to be around people. But I think what I found, I guess one of the things I want to say is that, sometimes we think we're going to go to the park day and we're going to get our needs met to talk to parents. What I found was that was not true, that I needed to let that part go because I wanted to be there for the kids. Like I was really creating that and that particular environment for the kids to make connections, enjoy themselves and whatever. And often I did need to be even peripherally involved, aware of it, that it wasn't really my time. So then it was like, okay, then what do I do for my time? So then it was finding ways. I had a friend that we did grocery store dates, and I found sometimes parenting conversations were hard for me. So that because, I can get a little worked up about children and all of that. So I actually found for me, interest-based was better too. So if I was going to something that maybe was a group about rocks or a group about singing bowls or, something else, like that's what we were talking about. We weren't talking about the curriculum they were using or what are your kids doing about this or that kind of thing. And so I think the big lesson for me, and it's not going to be a surprise to you two, is just open and curious. Like don't get tunneled in on it looking one way or a certain way. Just really start opening it up to, okay, what are the needs? There's a million different ways to meet it. What can we do?
I think it is so valuable and helpful to realize like that when I think of building community, I want a community. I don't need a community that meets all my needs. One group doesn't need to meet all my things. I can have various groups that, support me when I want to talk about singing bowls, and maybe another group is where I come for parenting stuff. I remember when I was wanting to build community and there really wasn't, I decided to start a conference and I ran a conference for 6 years. I kind of forget that now. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I did that thing. And that was great for bringing some unschooling families kind of out of the woodwork and gathering them in a spot for a couple of days. So that was a lovely way to meet some people that were local-ish, because people would definitely drive to come, but it was nice to just be surrounded for a couple of days with other like-minded parents who at least who were open and curious and wanting to learn. So that was actually a nice connection for parents. And then we had kids focused activities alongside it. And what was beautiful was like the shared parenting style where we were totally comfortable with parents coming and going from talks and going hanging out with their kids and activities, kids coming running in looking for their parents, etc. So yeah, there are just when you're open and like, Curie, what could I do? There are all sorts of possibilities, from letting people know that you're at the trampoline place to running a conference.
Yeah.
Right. And right, like that idea of that we don't have to find a whole family that fits our whole family as a friend group. Like that does give us a little bit of freedom then. So we can really look at the individual members of our family. What are we all looking for? And, what I did as far as finding in-person community for myself, that ended up, I didn't know how it was going to work out, but it did work out so well, was doing a book club, because, I wanted to find other people who like diving into ideas. I want to find people who are curious and want to learn. And so a book club is something that kind of draws that type of personality. And then the books I chose were things like How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and books by Alfie Kohn. And so, it was like, this is kind of what we're going to be talking about. And then I could start to see like, who is that resonating with? Those are the people who kept coming. Then we started reading Pam's books, and it became just, a fully unschooling book club. And so that was just a great, for a few years, a really good place for me to connect with people in person, who really just, were having the kinds of conversations that I wanted to be having. And it really filled my cup. So I loved that.
Yeah.
I love that. Like you can just choose the books and like somebody can pass and say, oh yeah, no, that's not something I'm interested in. They're moving on. It's not a judgment at all, but it's this kind of call that says, hey, over here, we're chatting about these kinds of things. Are you interested? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so much. But I think that leads us to that, we all live in different types of places, some smaller, some bigger, all across the world, when we're talking about who's listening to this podcast and even who's with us on the network. And so I guess the network brings to mind just this idea of, how important online communities were for me. And I think we all will have our stories to share about that. But I feel like the online communities, I mean, this is even way back in the day, were critical. Like back then it was Yahoo groups, a little bit primitive. And Pam and I have been friends for almost 20 years, probably, meeting on an online group and just incredible. And so what I love is that now we have things like the network where it's just so much more rich, in the tools and how to connect and how it brings us together and having those conversations, because it's very much like you kind of alluded to this, Pam, but it's like when we have maybe a more parenting question or something that's happening with our kids, I really wanted to take that to people that got it, like if I was going to ask a co-sleeping question, I wanted somebody that would go, okay, the bolster here and the thing there, and this is how I did it, versus, oh, just put them in a crib and you won't have that problem. Because for me, that wasn't what I was interested in. And so just finding that community of people that are thinking about the ideas, that are going through similar pieces, I just felt like that online community was such a rich part of my life. And I have traveled really the world meeting them, since, and that has enriched my life in so many ways.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, right? Go ahead, Erika.
Well, I was just going to say online community is real community, which is, I feel like, people can kind of poo-poo it sometimes. It's like, these aren't real, but oh my gosh, with my friends and their connections and with me and my connections, like we know that this is real. And we have such better tools now for connecting online with, Marco Polo and Discord videos and, video calling and everything. And so I feel like online connections can be so deep and rich and just provide access to a whole world of people in order for us to make, better and deeper connections.
Yeah, I remember back when we were first connecting, Anna, online, it was like those aren't very meaningful, right? When you're an online friend and like, oh my gosh, you're gonna go meet someone that you only know online. That's scary.
Right.
Those were the stories at the time. But yes,
Yeah.
I have found them to be such rich and meaningful connections and have lasted for many, many years. But as I was thinking about like the value of community for me personally, I just found that being in community with others who are on that same journey, a similar journey, really just helped me learn more. Okay. So maybe it's about what that journey may look like from somebody who's further along. I learned so much about myself, like about different things that I might want to ponder, where my blocks are. I find it inspiring to hear how things are going for people who are further along. Like you said, Anna, that's a place where I can take questions and get ideas that like I would really like to think about versus having to discard the first 6 or 7 because it's like, yeah, no, that's not my path. So often, if I would ask, like parenting or even learning kinds of questions in my more conventional group, friend group, etc., it would be, send them to school or, send them to their room. Like, and, fine, I can completely understand why those are your answers. But I found it would be a little bit of a disconnect in that relationship if they, out of the goodness of their heart, were trying to help me with my issue, and I was going to completely ignore all their suggestions every time. So I
Right,
found there
right.
were different communities where I wanted to bring different thoughts, different questions, and I would get different things out of them. So yeah, it wasn't holding one, and it wasn't that it had to be in person. Like there was so much value all over the place, right?
And I guess that's making me think too, just, we have this vast world and, finding people, Erika, like you were talking about, that like to think about the nuances or the ideas, for all three of us, that's important. And like when, Erika and I connected, which was also online, it was just like, oh my gosh, there's so many things, that we can talk about and do and want to process. And like that connection was so deep so quickly. And, I just think how lucky are we? Because, I live in kind of the mid of the United States on the East Coast, and she lives in Miami, as far as you can get away, and still be on the East Coast there. And so, and yet, it's this relationship that has been so valuable to me. And there's been so much personal growth, like you said, Pam. Like I feel like, and one of the things I love about the network is that very piece. Like there's so much personal growth for me because obviously our kids are grown, Pam and I, and yet like it's such a process of understanding ourselves. We still obviously have our kids in our lives, thankfully. And, I just feel like it's so rich to learn from these other parents that are being so intentional and so just interested in these and talking about the nuances and connecting and just loving up our kids and all of those pieces. And I love the cultural aspects that opens up to us from people all over the world and what's different for them. I just think that cannot be beat. I just think it's just such a gift of being alive in this time right now is that. And so I love that piece.
Right.
Erika, go, and then I want to say something about kids.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I was going to.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say one more thing, like about the network. Right, like in order to like online communities are so great because they draw the people in, according to what that community is. And so if you can find a community that fits you, it's just filled with people who you're going to have fun connecting with. And so for me, like the learning that I've had in the last 3 years, I feel like it's been just exponential because I'm now in this online community that really fits like what I like to think about and talk about. And, just all these amazing things come up. So I think, finding like being able to travel around the world, finding these individual people who are such a good fit would be just this impossible thing if it were not for online groups. And really, it's the same in other groups that I've been on, on Facebook or, just different places on the internet about certain things. So, finding people that love to talk about the things that you're interested in is just super great. And you can't always find that in person where you live. And so, yeah, I just love what we have available.
Yeah. And so where I'm going to go with that, and then Pam, to you, is that it's the same for kids because, realistically, again, the geographic age, of wherever we happen to live, that can be a very small pool. But, both of my kids have met people from all over the world, still have lifelong relationships a decade later, that they connected with over gaming or other interests, in different ways. And so there's so many tools to help our kids take advantage of this rich online environment that, again, like you said, Pam, can sometimes get this kind of scary rap and, oh, that's not safe. But there really are ways to navigate that world in a way that is super enriching.
Yeah. And I mean, and we've talked about it in many episodes before. Like we can just go back to our navigating technology episodes,
Yeah.
But it's like a night and day difference because we're cultivating connected relationships with our kids. So, and our kids know that when they want to do something, we're going to help them figure out ways to do it. So they're not worried about sharing pieces so much when they're ready to share them.
Right.
It's not an expectation, but when they need your help to try and, go meet another family, meet up with a friend, we're there helping them trying to figure that out and connecting with the other parents and all those pieces. But yes, that's where I was going. They can find that's the interesting thing, like the same way we found that it's so fun to connect with other people who want to think about whatever the particular interest is that we want to dive into. And maybe it goes from just following some people on Instagram or on Facebook just to start getting an idea, and then maybe digging a bit deeper, maybe finding a group that starts talking about it, and then maybe more of a private group. Like there are different levels to it, and it depends on how connected we would like that community to become, right? So it's not that I have to dive into the deep end right away. I can kind of dip my toe in and start having an idea. And it's the same with our kids. Like our kids can have interests that maybe there aren't a lot of people locally that are interested in that same thing. So they can find that connection and that conversation that they're looking for, that enriches their lives, that helps them learn, that helps them feel part of a community. They are part of a community. Like I look at Lissy, she connected online around photography. There weren't a lot of kids, high school age kids who there were some who were interested in it, but they didn't have a lot of time to, they were just busy with classes and things. So she found online community at the time. That was through Flickr. And, that really sustained her for a number of years. And then she's like, oh, I really want in person. I want to start finding my tribe, like face to face, which, initiated her moving to New York City when she was 18, because that's what she was looking for. But oh my gosh, we just set that up as kind of a 2-month thing. Let's try it out, go see what it's like. And, she was very excited with what she found and then wanted to stay there. So, working that out for her, it was, it's a journey. We always go back to it's a journey. You don't know where it's going to end up, but it's like, I'm going to try this next step. This next step looks really interesting. I'm really curious about it. Open and curious, here's a way that we can kind of make that happen, and you work together and the thing happens. And then how did that unfold? How did people feel? Did we want to, take the next step into the pool or whatever metaphor you want to use? But that's just an example of how community can grow and how, online community can be beautifully enriching at times. And then at times you're like, I'm looking for, in-person community, and oh my gosh, I need to go to another country. I mean, she had an agent here who told her, like, I'll never forget that at our first meeting, I don't know, she was 15, whatever. But she said, if you really want to work, it needs to be New York or LA. And like that seed was planted
Yeah.
then. It's true, that is where the vibrant communities are. And she spent years, I don't know, 8 years or so in New York. And then a year and change ago, she moved to LA and is finding another vibrant community. And literally the other week, she was telling me about the difference between the creative communities in those two cities. And like LA is vibing for her right now. It's really fitting who she feels she's become. And like she just loves it there. But that's it. And so her community has changed, yet has New York people fly out and stay with her and hang out with her. And, LAP, like it's just so fun to watch how our communities can unfold and how we can cultivate them and how we can find new ones. And it really does, I think, just help, like we talked about at the beginning, to take the expectations off it and to understand what our true desires are. What are we really looking for? And then not like we have to beeline right there. It's like, okay, so this is kind of what I think I'm looking for. What's a step I can take now in that direction? And valuing whether that's online or in person, it really doesn't matter, because you can get value out of that. And it doesn't mean that you're stuck there forever. It's not a feeling of stuck. It's like, let me try this out and see what I discover about myself and about the other people.
Yeah.
I feel like I get but oh my gosh, yes, I just love the idea.
Right. I mean, it's such a valuable way to look at it, of just, right, no one right way. It's just a journey. And it was reminding me of, something I heard of, like, the more true you are, true to yourself that you are being, the easier it is to connect with community that will actually suit you. Right. So like if you're being true about your interests and what you like to do and the kind of conversations you like to have and all of that kind of stuff, then you're more easily able to find the connections that fit. And so I think the way that our kids' lives are is really set up perfectly to be able to kind of follow that, because they can really just be themselves and follow the things that they're interested in and what they want to do. And we have this whole world of potential community online and in person. And, the fact that my kids have seen me make online friends and then go visit them, they're like, oh, so that's possible too. Really the whole world is open for us. And since I've visited Virginia and visited Anna, Maya keeps saying, I'm going to live in Virginia one day. It's so beautiful. And so I don't know, it just kind of like opens up the world. We're not just in this one place. And really, as long as we are following kind of, what is it? Our inner voice is telling us, then yeah, it's awesome.
Right. And I love that. And just like a funny story from our lives. So like Raylan was 13 and she was on the 2 years prior to that had been on an Unschooling Gamers group and had made connections. And so a mom that I had met in person, but actually lived in Maine. So we're in Virginia. We were in North Carolina at the time, Maine there. We decided to fly sight unseen to meet these boys that they had been gaming with on the West Coast in Washington State. It's a huge flight. It's a big deal. And people thought we were nuts at the time to like, what are you doing? You don't know these people at all. And these boys' parents were like, this is a little bit weird. And yet they're now 10 years, 11 years later, they're getting married. They're still in touch. They are, these were these rich friendships. And I think that comes from just, again, opening it up. Just there's not one right way. There's not one avenue to making friends and making connections. And so as unschoolers, we have this whole world to choose from and to explore and to be a part of. And like you saw with Maya, it just opens up this idea of I can be friends anywhere. We can travel anywhere. We can meet people. We can figure things out. And I don't know, I love that. The energy of that is so much more expansive. So I think one of the things I want to end on for me is, if you feel yourself feeling constricted about community, like listen to this, breathe this in, because it's really expansive. Like it really can be this expansive idea of all the different options, so many different ways to make connections locally, online, in person with travel, like all of these things. And when we come from that expansive place, like that's when we see the opportunities just start appearing.
Yeah, I had one other thing pop to mind that I forgot to mention earlier with the kids stuff. Like sometimes there are kids who are super extroverted who will play with anyone they meet at any time. And that's okay too. Like I've seen parents worry about but they don't have friends. But if you're going to the park and they're playing with kids and they're having a great time and they don't, if that's not something that the child is worrying about, it's that there's the no one right way thing again about that too. And just, really listening to what the individual members of the family are saying and just knowing there's lots of options.
Yes.
Yes. I love that piece. It is the individual person. Like, what are their needs? And again, like you were saying, just like if they're enjoying whatever it is they're doing, like there's your answer for now, right there. Right. So that's just another piece of the puzzle. That's who my child is, and that's how they like to engage with the world right now. Yeah, we can get ourselves in our head, worried about, but the other thing, the other way. Okay, well, thank you so much. That was so much fun.
Yes. Loved it.
And thanks to everyone listening for joining us. We hope you too have enjoyed our conversation about building community and will find it helpful on your unschooling journey. Wishing you a lovely day. Bye.
Bye-bye.